Hello and welcome once again to How to Beat Your Kids at Board Games. I'm Dan.
And I'm John.
And we're real excited, as always, to be here with you today. But we're especially excited today because it has been a little over 2 months since our last episode. We took a break. We had an election. We had school. We're both students. We had a lot on our plate. We had Thanksgiving. We hope you all had a fun, safe Thanksgiving. And as promised, we are back with some more content for the holidays, just in time. So without further ado, I'll introduce our topic of this episode, Clue. The origins of Clue will actually be talked about by John.
All right, yeah, so Clue could also be Cluedo, depending on where you live. It was invented in England by one Anthony E. Pratt all the way back in 1944. And so, you history nuts out there, well, you might not need to be a history nut to remember that 1944 is right in the middle of World War II.
Wait, I thought it was the War of 1812.
Oh, you're right. It could be the war. Yeah, that was a long one for sure. Yeah. So, smack dab in the middle of World War II. Invented in England. Again, what was happening in England at the time? This one you might need to be more of a history nut for. But, England was getting bombed. Mm-hmm. In order to prepare for the bombings on cities, they were doing long air raid drills where they'd have all the citizens hunker down into bunkers and just keep them there for extended periods of time as part of the drill. So our Anthony Pratt here came up with Clue as a way to pass time during these drills. And it was originally called Murder. Not just murder, but...
Great name for a family game.
Yeah, exactly. You can't forget the exclamation point there at the end. So he invented this game in the bunkers. He was actually a musician. And a lot of things sort of changed about the game before it was eventually put to press. But, that was the inception of Clue, or Cluedo, as we know it today. Yeah, so we're going to get right into it here. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about we're going to give you a bit of a rules summary. I think Clue's a pretty famous game, so I don't want to go spend too long getting into the weeds here talking about the rules. Just a quick refresher. Clue's a game where, you have a bunch of suspects. Someone's committed a murder. There's a bunch of suspects. There's a bunch of potential murder weapons, a bunch of potential rooms where the murder was committed. Your job is to figure out who did it. And you do this by making suggestions or implications of who you think did it. And yeah.
Yeah, so to go into that real quick, there is a difference in the game between making a suggestion and making an accusation. So even though colloquially I might like to say I accuse such and such, there is a difference, and we'll get into that. But that is the reason why we're kind of doing some gymnastics here.
Yeah, and you can kind of think of it like, if you were actually in this situation and someone had committed a crime, you might bring up the possibility of someone having committed it, but you really wouldn't want to accuse someone until you really knew it was them. And so that's sort of what happens here. You make your accusation when you think you really know who did it, but you suggest people when you're just trying to figure out what's going on. And yeah, so back to it. You're going to make suggestions. Other players will have chances to prove you wrong using the cards in their hand. If no one can prove you wrong and you don't have the cards in your hand, then the only alternative left over is that the cards are in the confidential file in the middle of the board, which contains the information about who committed the crime.
Yes, conveniently, the answer to who committed the crime is contained in an envelope left in the cellar.
Oh, yeah.
As all crimes are solved.
I mean, that's where I would keep it. Yeah. I don't know about you guys. Leave us some answers in the comments. But yeah, so this is a board game, but I would say as far as board game aspects go, it's pretty light on how much the actual board layout really affects what's going on. You're going to use some dice to move from room to room. The interesting things that people might like kind of get wrong, or maybe play as house rules is that to make a suggestion that someone committed the crime, you have to move into a room. and say you move into the kitchen, you have to suggest that the murder was committed in the kitchen. You can't suggest any other room. So that's sort of one thing that I haven't always played with. Another thing is that there's a couple weird things with movement. They don't want you going, because of this like whole restriction on where you can accuse. They don't want you like doubling back. You can't like go. Exactly. You can only suggest when you enter, and you can't the next turn, go right back out and right back in to make another suggestion. You have to wait a turn.
Yeah, basically you can't suggest the same room 2 turns in a row. There has to be some variety, or you have to wait a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing is that when you implicate someone, say, because the suspects of the game are also the characters you're playing as. So say you implicate Colonel Mustard, whoever's playing as Colonel Mustard, you actually move their game piece into the room with you. So you can kind of like teleport people's pieces around the board, which is something that when I was a kid, I never played that way. I didn't even know this was a rule until our research. So kind of interesting. Lastly, Dan, do you want to take the very last bullet we have here? It's really, I think, the most relevant one as far as gameplay goes.
Got it. So when someone suggests a set of suspects, you go around clockwise, and if a player can prove you wrong, they must. So essentially, I move into the kitchen. I suggest that it was Professor Plum with the lead pipe in the kitchen. And now the player on my left, if they have any of those 3 cards, they must show it to me. Only one. So if they have more than one, they only have to show me one to disprove my theory, what I just suggested. If they can't, it goes to the next person, and so on, until it gets back to me. So essentially, like John said earlier, if I don't have any of these 3 cards in my hand that I just suggested, and nobody was able to prove me wrong, then I must be correct. That must be the right one, and at that point, I could, if I wanted to, make an accusation.
Right. Yeah, and you can accuse someone. You can make an accusation at any time during your turn. Even right after you suggested someone and gotten some information, you could make an accusation. But be a little bit wary. As soon as you make your first accusation, it's your only accusation. Yep. You don't get more than one chance for that. So, yeah. And then I think Dan already touched on it, but we kind of alluded to it. But you're allowed to suggest that someone committed the crime or a set of suspect weapons and places and things, even if you hold those cards in your hand. And that's actually a very important part of the game, as we'll get into later. So just because you hold cards in your hand doesn't mean it wouldn't really benefit you to guess those cards. Actually, it'll help you. We'll just see that it helps you get a little bit more targeted information out of your opponents. So, cool.
Definitely.
Something to keep in mind. Okay. Well, I think we're good with the rules summary. Yeah, after that, a bit of a super well-planned, awkward pause. We can move into the strategy portion, everyone's favorite part of our podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can just edit that out too. Yeah.
We could always edit it out, but I think we'll leave it in. It builds character. Really shows you more about us, who we are.
Remember that it's been over 2 months since we recorded a podcast.
Yeah, we're a bit rusty, and hey, guys, we're people too.
Exactly.
We make mistakes. We might seem perfect.
2020 has been really rough on a lot of people.
What are you, like the 80th person to say that in a recording that I've seen in the last week? Yeah, okay. Moving on. So we're going to talk about this game, Clue, in 2 segments. I'm going to sort of piece it out. One of these we're going to refer to as deduction, and the other as misdirection. And so they kind of explain themselves. But Dan, you want to start us off with deduction? And I don't know, maybe what is this? What is this Sherlock Sheet?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so the official name for the sheet is that it does not have an official name, but we like to call it the Sherlock Sheet because what you're really trying to do here be a detective. You're trying to deduce what information everybody else has. So as we've mentioned, you find out which cards are in the middle by finding out which cards are not in the middle.
Well, hold up for a second, though. What is the Sherlock Sheet?
Okay, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Here.
Okay,
yeah, dumb it down for me.
The Sherlock Sheet is a sheet of paper. There's a I think it's a pad of paper, or it might just be a stack of paper that will come in the box. You can order more. Actually, the rules tell you where to order more.
It's kind of funny. Yeah, I've never ran into that, but
yeah. So essentially, this is a sheet, and it has the names of all of the different rooms on it, all of the different suspects, and all of the different potential weapons, and sort of neatly sectioned off. And then it'll have about maybe 5 or 6 columns. I think I haven't really.
Yeah,
I haven't really.
It's sort of a grid where you can put in some check marks and things.
Exactly, and the purpose behind the Sherlock Sheet is for you to be able to figure out which cards everybody else has. So if I, like in our previous example, I say Professor Plum with the lead pipe in the kitchen, and John shows me Professor Plum. John is right on my left. He shows me Professor Plum. Then, I can use my Sherlock Sheet to go and cross off Professor Plum because, I know now that it's not Professor Plum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, I mean, Dan and I were talking about this before, but we always thought that this Sherlock Sheet, it has many columns, as we've said. We always would play one game, one column.
Yep.
And it turns out you can do a lot better than that. Because if you really only use one column, you only get one box per weapon, one box per person, one box per room. Well, that doesn't really help you keep track of who has what. It doesn't help you keep track of what you've guessed.
But it is better for the environment.
It is better for the environment. It definitely saves paper. But yeah, so definitely use all of that Sherlock Sheet. I actually recommend that, perhaps you divide the sheet up and give every player that you're playing against a column, and that you can mark down what you think they have. This is a sort of like a nice little way to get all the information on there that you can. You need to like squeeze out as much from this Sherlock Sheet as possible. Yeah. So maybe like, I don't know, one column that you're thinking is like your final guesses or total, maybe you're like total accumulated information. I don't know. How would you do it?
I think there's probably a few different ways to do it, but I think the biggest takeaway from the episode in terms of the Sherlock Sheet, your fact sheet, is you need to use the whole thing. So not just use that one column. So I think as I would start it, I would probably give each opposing player a column. Mm-hmm. Maybe I give myself the first column.
Right.
And I mark the cards off that are in my hand. Maybe you reserve that first column or the last column, like John said, for my final guesses. And in that case too, you would also obviously cross off the cards in your own hand. But essentially, if like I said, if John shows me Professor Plum, then I'm not just going to cross out Professor Plum. I'm going to specifically cross off Professor Plum in John's column. Mm-hmm. So that means that let's say Jono wasn't the person on my left. Let's say they were the person on my right. That might affect whether I will venture a guess to Professor Plum again, whether I think it'll show me more information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is just going to put you, say you're against people who aren't really using the whole sheet, this is going to put you at a huge advantage against them. And let me just explain to you why. When you use this Sherlock Sheet and you're really using all of it, you can keep track of every turn, okay? Not just your turns. Exactly. Who disproves which suggestion, who doesn't disprove which suggestion. For example, the easiest one for me to wrap my head around is this. Say I suggest Professor Plum with the lead pipe in the kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
And the player to my left, Joanne, can't prove me wrong. Well, now I know that Joanne doesn't have any of those 3 cards.
Mm-hmm.
So that helps me narrow down what's in her hand. Okay, so then if the next person, say they also can't disprove me, then I know they also don't have those 3 cards. You already gained a ton of information. Once you kind of start, and you sort of accumulate this information, and eventually you get like really clear pictures of what's really going on in everyone's hands, and you can get there much faster than anyone who's not doing this deductive work. Another thing is that I like to do is when someone does say I'm not the one making the suggestion, say Joanne's making the suggestion, and the person next to her can disprove her, then you can sort of in player 3 in this case column, you can put question marks by all the 3 ones that Joanne just guessed. Mm-hmm. Because now you know that they have one of those 3 cards that she just guessed. So again, that is already, and say like because of previous guesses, you know that player doesn't have the other 2 cards. Mm-hmm. Well, you've just figured out what card they have.
Right.
So it's things like that.
Yeah, and I've even seen one method that I'm honestly still trying to wrap my head around a little bit, but it involves, rather than writing a question mark, which is certainly better than, the alternatives, which is, one column, check mark or blank, you write the first time somebody disproves, you write a 1 next to the cards that they disproved. And then, for the second set, for that same person, you write a 2 next to each one that they could have potentially disproven. And then, so of course, like,
or you could maybe even tally it. Would you think tallying would be better, or because you wouldn't write a 2? I think it'd get complicated if you were. I don't know. What do you think?
So I don't think it would be that bad. I mean, because I don't know if one. It depends on if like one card is in the disproving set that the same person disproves like multiple times.
Right.
So
I see. So right. if one of those tallies gets up to like 4 or 5, then mm-hmm. there's a higher chance that they have that card mm-hmm. than that they have the other cards that are stuck at like 1 or 2.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you could probably do it with tallies,
but it wouldn't be as visually
it's
striking.
I don't know that it's necessarily quite as informative because, like, let's say you have 5 cards, and one of them has 2 tallies, and the other 4 have 1 tally each. It's probably more informative for you to know that the first, second, and fourth one were guessed first, and then the others, right?
Okay, so the first time that they disprove,
mm-hmm.
you mark the set that they disprove as a 1.
That they disprove as a 1, exactly.
Okay, so then if they disprove different cards the next time, even though those other ones haven't been disproved before, mm-hmm. you mark them as a 2.
Exactly.
Okay, exactly. I get it now. Okay, that does preserve more information.
Right. So that's another thing to think about. And the nice thing about whether you're doing a tally or a number is if you're using your whole Sherlock sheet, you can, if John disproves me once, I can put the, if he disproves someone else once, I can put the 1s next to that one. And then if Susie disproves someone else, then I can put 1s in the Susie column.
Right.
For this,
You have the space. I mean,
yeah.
You've probably got to make some pretty small 1s and 2s, but
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And they give you those really small like golf pencils, which I think are kind of hard to draw small with, but you'll get better with practice.
It's the physical limitations of the game that really get you. It's just your ability to draw with this tiny little pencil that affects how you win.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm on board with that. So, you've got your Sherlock sheet. You've got a column for each player. When that player doesn't disprove something, you put little X's by the cards they can't disprove. Mm-hmm. When they do disprove something, you put numbers by the ones they could have been disproving. Okay, sort of piece this together. Eventually, though, how do you get that like solidifying piece of information that tells you what's actually in their hand? Like, I mean, is it just the idea that like eventually you have enough, you just have a ton of information, it's pretty obvious what's in their hand? The other player's hands? When does it sort of converge? Or like, what do you need?
See, I mean, so you hit on something before, which is like if one card is in like 3 or 4 or 5 disprove sets, they probably have that card.
Mm-hmm. Because my guess is like, okay, you can have situations eventually, say everyone has 7. I think it's like everyone has 7 cards or roughly.
Is it 7? No. It's, well, okay. It depends on how many players you have. I think last time I played with 4 players, we each had like 3 or 4, maybe 5.
Okay, so not that many cards.
Not that many.
Well, that means you have to eliminate a lot of cards to sort of reverse engineer what they have by elimination.
But
so
the other thing you can do, you also can guess. Like, if you think someone might have this card,
you can just confirm it right off the bat.
You can guess that card, along with maybe 2 other cards that you have,
right. Okay,
which we'll get into that a little more.
So like you're sort of building, you're sort of just like building up what you think, like some almost like opinions of what what's probably in their hand, and then say you really need a spot check, you can do a spot check to confirm who has a given card. Like say we really need to know who has plum, then it will like lock in a bunch of people's hand, or a lot of information for you. Then you guess like 2 cards in your hand and Professor Plum.
Right. Exactly.
That could be good. Okay, I can see that. Yeah, I mean, you really can't lose by taking down all this extra information. Well, you can always lose, but I just mean like you're never gonna be worse off for knowing this stuff. And I mean, it can seem a bit tedious, but I also think it's sort of why you're playing Clue, is because like you're kind of like sleuthing around and you're putting together all these like different clues, like different people suggesting all these different sets and how other people reacted to that, and you're using all this information. You finally can like put it together and make a real conclusion. I feel like it's just so satisfying.
Definitely, yeah. I think from my research at least. Which was actually reading one of the articles you pointed me to, but it seems like it really adds a lot of flesh to the game when you're actually deducing in this way. Because you're using so much more information, you are acquiring and using so much more information by playing in this way than if you have this sort of one column. Yes or no, like I guessed this, so and so disproved me, so I'm going to make like 1 X next to this one thing. That is sort of more of if everyone's playing like that, it becomes sort of a waiting game, almost a game of chance, which like it still is a game of chance, but it doesn't require as much brain power, right? And so it could be a lot of the complaints that we saw about Clue in our research were, it's just not very stimulating. But like if you are playing the right way, it's very stimulating.
Yeah, I think it is. And another thing, well, I've already mentioned that, but basically these deductive tactics will put you way ahead of probably where your 8-year-old or your 10-year-old will start. Exactly. And just marking that, they showed me this card, I can X off that card. Just by doing this and keeping track of extra information, you'll be miles ahead of the strategy where you only mark down what people have shown you and what you have. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's a really fun way. I mean, I don't have kids, so maybe I'll find out one day, but if this is definitely something where if you're playing this way and nobody else is, you will win pretty much every time. And you might become sort of a god of Clue among your kids.
Until they figure it out,
exactly.
Right? Now, conversely, if everyone in the game does this, you will have no advantage.
Exactly.
It's kind of like in when we've talked about Monopoly and we've talked about Parcheesi, we can give you these strategies, but ultimately everyone has access to these strategies, right? And so like, if you are able to deduce very well, you're only able to deduce with probably about the same information that everyone else is able to deduce, or same amount of information, because everyone else is also getting to guess and mark things off. And so you can kind of think of this Sherlock Sheet filling out as a baseline. Like this is what you need to do to be in the game.
Yeah. And I think a
When you're
helpful
playing with-
way,
yeah.
I think a helpful way to look at it is, this is the stuff that you can do. This is okay. Yeah, this is a good analogy. So this is the sort of chess portion of the game where if you are paying attention and you have a system and you're writing everything down, what we've just been talking about now is the information that you should absolutely have if you're taking it down right. You know that I know that I suggested Plum with the pipe in the kitchen, and that John disproved me by showing me Professor Plum. I also know for sure that John guessed, 3 other things, and Susie disproved him, so she might have, all of this is perfect information, even though there's
it's
like
close because
it's
you
close
don't
to
know
perfect.
what card they showed.
Well, exactly.
But you're
But
getting
you
showed
know
a
the
different
set.
card than them,
Right.
so it evens out.
Like you know the math of it, and at that point it's just a matter of like probability, right? But then this next part that we're going to get into is the more poker part of the game. And so you mentioned this is the baseline. What we've just talked about is the baseline. It'll get you even with a skilled player. So if you know all this stuff, well, there's still more information in the game to know and to keep track of. So it's important to keep track of what people asked for, not only what they suggested. And there's maybe not a great way.
What do you mean the difference? But asking for and suggesting.
Okay, so I know that Susie disproved a set with Colonel Mustard in the study with the candlestick.
Okay.
But I also know that John asked Colonel Mustard in the study with the candlestick.
Oh, okay.
Both of those pieces of information are important for me to remember. It's just that the fact that Susie disproved them is much easier for me to write down on my Sherlock sheet.
Because another cool thing is that once you've, say you've nailed down one of those, say you've nailed down where the candlestick is, and you know that Susie doesn't have it, then she could only have disproved 2 of those 3. She couldn't have disproved the candlestick.
Right.
So that's another piece. And I was also thinking about when someone suggests 3 cards, like you have to kind of think about, are they suggesting something that's in their hand?
Exactly.
And if they're suggesting something that's in their hand, then maybe they're like hot on the trail of, say, the room. Say they're suggesting like 2 cards that they have, but the third one is something else, that like maybe that could be the one, or that's what the other player thinks is the best candidate for the room, or for example. So you can kind of get even more information that way, and that's yeah. And so we'll get on to poker playing in a sec. I'll just touch on a couple things here.
Yeah, maybe the first part that we've touched on is better deemed backgammon, since there is some chance involved.
Yeah, true. Yeah, but I'll just touch on a couple things and we can get into the real fun stuff. But yeah, kind of marking other players' suspicious behavior. So, like I said, if someone's asking or suggesting a bunch of cards that they already have, then that's pretty suspicious. And so you might look into that and say, okay, maybe they're hot on the trail or something. The last thing I have here is pretty much just a fact. So this is a little pro tip here. Whoever gets the room right first is at a huge advantage. The guessing the correct room is the most important because, and here's why. 2 reasons. One, there are 6 players to accuse. There are 6 weapons to accuse with, and there are 9 rooms. Okay, so by those odds, there are just more rooms to guess, and so it'll take you longer to figure out what the room is. The other thing is that you have to move into a room to guess that room. So there are like restrictions on what you can even guess. So say the room happens to be, say someone figures out that the room is, the study, and you happen to be on the complete opposite side of the board as the study, and you haven't figured out it's the study yet. It might take you a very long time to figure that out, just because you have to like move physically all the way over there. And so that sort of restriction on how you can guess and the restriction on how many rooms there are to guess makes it so that you really want to prioritize the room first.
Right. And, just something I thought of while you were talking about that is, if you're on the opposite side of the board of, the room you're suspecting is true, you can also, in a somewhat less efficient way, figure out this information simply by asking, two cards in your own hand plus the room you're in, having people continue to disprove the room. But like John said, that takes much longer. It's much less efficient. So you can definitely become very lucky and sort of land in the right room from the get-go.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So are we ready to move on?
I think we're ready to move on.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing that I don't think we ever outwardly stated, but we kind of mentioned with the Sherlock Sheet is, and I think is a great mantra, which is that in Clue you play more on your turn, on their turn than your turn. Just to keep that in mind with the Sherlock Sheet, you generally get more information just by watching 4 other people guess than by your one guess. So keep that in mind with these information tactics. And so it even makes it actually leads pretty perfectly into the poker playing section, because often the best use for your guess could be exclusively to mislead other players instead of gaining you new information. Yeah, and so, yeah, exactly. You can bluff. How can you use your suggestions to throw other players off, Dan?
What we have here is guessing multiple cards that you have. So let's tackle that one first. And I think this is also useful, in my opinion, to gain as a really quick way to gain a small amount of information. So like the example I just mentioned, where you're not sure about the room, and that I have in my hand Colonel Mustard and the candlestick. I'm just not sure about the room. So then I guess that it's Colonel Mustard with the candlestick in whatever room I'm in, say the study. And then somebody shows me the study. So I know that it's not the study. But if I had said something else, like Professor Plum with the candlestick in the study, I might have just been shown Professor Plum rather than the room. So if I want to pinpoint on the room, I really want somebody to show me a picture of a room, then I can guess, I can take 2 non-room cards in my hand, guess those, and then definitely the person who disproves me will disprove me with a room or not at all.
And so, okay, what I'm seeing from that is that actually guessing multiple cards that you have probably gives other players more information. Because if someone knows that you have the 2 cards that you're guessing of your own, then they know whatever's going on. Say you get disproved, they know what card was disproved, and if you weren't disproved, they know that you have the right room.
Right.
So this might actually go in the counterexample column, and that guessing multiple cards that you do have could be very dangerous. If, say, you have a lead on figuring out what the room is, I feel like you might honestly not want to try to pinpoint the room right away, because that could also alert other players that you've pinpointed the room. So yeah, okay, that's interesting. I do think though that the situation changes when, instead of guessing multiple cards, and I think it's also lessened when you only guess 1 card that you have too.
Right.
But you get less targeted information. Like you can't pinpoint exactly what's going to be disproven.
And you have essentially a 50-50 shot of learning the information that you want. And with that, you sacrifice some certainty in getting what you want, but you also sacrifice some of the information you're giving other players.
Yeah, like not leading other players too far. Okay. But the extreme case is actually just guessing 3 cards that you have.
Yeah.
Literally just saying, I don't actually want to learn any new information this turn, but I do really want to throw some people off.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, honestly, we've talked through this a little bit, a couple times now. I think it's still kind of hard for me to wrap my head around in terms of why you would want to do this. So yes, you're saying I don't want to learn any more information, and I am assuming that at this point you either know or are assuming that everybody else knows that you have these 3 cards in your hand.
No.
So,
okay, let's take, for example, what happens when we're guessing 2 cards that we have. Okay, guessing a person in a room that we have because we're trying to figure out the weapon. Okay, so in that case, say no one disproves us. We now know what the weapon is. Okay. Now, say the other players you're playing against, have seen 2 of the 3 cards that are in your hand. Okay. You want to guess this set of 3 cards, and 2 of these cards are well known to everyone else, but the 3rd card isn't. Right. Okay, so you guess all 3 of these cards, and when no one disproves you, people think, "Oh shoot, that 3rd card, that that knife that he just guessed, like that must be the weapon."
Right.
But actually, you were holding the weapon, and just no one knew that you were holding the weapon. So I think that's what you gain out of it is like when people have some knowledge of your hand, but not complete knowledge.
I see.
Yeah, and so I think this doesn't really pair well if you've been guessing multiple cards, like repeatedly. Like basically, the more people know about your hand, the less effective this is.
Sure. Okay.
Well,
yeah.
But also if they know very little about your hand, it doesn't do much either. If people know a bit, but not too much, it's sort of a balancing point.
Interesting. Okay, so that kind of, I mean, we are in the misdirection category, and I don't know that we have a specific bullet for this, but how do I make sure that over the course of the game I'm not giving away so much information to my competitors? Like, how is there a good rule of thumb for how to give away the least information?
Good rules of thumb. Well, not that I know of. I think this is actually one of the hardest parts of the game.
Yeah.
This is, you can have your deductive skills, you can have your amazing Sherlock Sheet. Realistically, if you really wanted to be perfect at this game, you'd have 2 Sherlock Sheets.
Oh yeah.
One keeping track of what you know, and then one keeping track of what you think everyone else knows, which is just so much work. It's just it's so much. I don't think anyone reasonably should do this. Yeah. And I think it comes a bit with playing, but I think it's a bit of like understanding what cards you've shown to people, doubling up on the same cards when you can. Like, say you've already shown someone that you have the rope, you probably want to show someone else that you have the rope, even if you could disprove them in a different way.
Yeah. I was thinking of that too. So like, quite simply, don't show more of your hand than you have to. So yeah, when you're disproving people, try, I don't know, maybe you have like a little mental hierarchy in terms of what you show people. Like if they ask for the rope and Colonel Mustard, and I have both of those, I'm going to show them the rope first. And then
you also might prefer not to show a room.
I was thinking that as well. Yeah.
Important.
Yeah. But then another thing is like when you're asking, I think.
Sorry about that. We got a dog.
Oh
yeah. Get in here.
He's incredibly cute. His name is Pugsley.
He's ravenous.
Yes. So what I was saying is also when you are guessing and you're trying to obtain information by guessing sort of 1 or 2 of the cards in your hand, so that you know that what you're going to be disproven with will be something not in your hand. Obviously, will be the information you're looking for. You want to make sure I don't guess like, the knife and the weapon and the person once, and then the room and the weapon next time, or something like that.
Yeah.
Because I don't know.
It all gets very complicated.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it comes down to game time decisions, just kind of thinking like, okay, if I were to guess these 2 cards that are in my hand, who would be able to like benefit from this? And you can kind of think of it based on like who you've shown those cards to. those people are probably going to benefit the most from you doing sort of a targeted search like that. But yeah, it's all too, I think, too much.
Yeah.
There's too many combinations and things that could be happening to go over examples in here. But I do agree that it's a big part of the game is like, don't give up more information about your hand. There's like information that you can give up that is not mandatory for you to give up. Obviously, you have to show someone when you like can prove them wrong, right? But you can also show people, more information by showing them different cards than you've already shown them, or by what you guess, right? And we've already touched on both of these, so it's all a big web.
Yeah, it's a huge web, and I think we were talking about this, but I think a lot of how you interpret this web and how you sort of integrate this web into your thinking, first you make sure you've got everything going on your Sherlock sheet perfect. That's going to take a while as you play more games of Clue. I think even just keeping track of the bare minimum Sherlock sheet stuff is going to be a challenge at first, but then as soon you will be able to do it without really thinking.
Yeah.
And that's when you can start maybe asking yourself these other questions in the game, remembering what other people have asked, truly thinking about what everyone else thinks is in your hand. So there may not be any quick and simple rules of thumb on it, but you should get better with practice if you are focusing on it. And the other thing is the suggestions that we're making today, up to this point, I'd say everything with the Sherlock sheet, that's great. Take that as gospel. Everything that we're talking about now with misdirection is sort of our best guess, but we would really love it if you guys took what we're saying, some of our suggestions, try them out, see what works for you, and adapt the game in your own way. That's definitely what we're going to do, because it might not all work on paper, but there might be a good strategy that works for you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it can come down to play style. Some people, that might be better at a game like Mafia or Among Us or like deceptive games can probably pull off the Mad Lad.
Oh yeah,
like game where they're literally just guessing 3 cards that they have the entire game. I feel like you could try wacky strategies like that to throw people off. And if you pull it off, you can pull it off.
Yep.
And I think the reason that these strategies work is because you play more on their turns than your turn. I'm kind of thinking of a couple examples here, or just sort of add-ons. When I don't know if I can guess something without giving valuable information away to someone else, you can always not guess. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing is that that just sort of came to me is that if you're really close to figuring out the room, say, then, and like say it's the beginning of the game, you haven't figured out the other 2, then why would you spend the extra time actually pinning down one room out of 2? Why wouldn't you let other people do that for you with their guesses? Because eventually that enough information will probably come to you, and you won't ask a question that very blatantly tells everyone, oh, it's this room.
Oh, wow.
So let everyone fill in the gaps. Now, obviously, this doesn't work if it's the end of the game. Whoever figures out the room first, the room is the last thing people need to figure out, or something like that. You're really close to winning. Then go for it. But I think it could be a cool thing to do to just don't finish the searches.
Yeah.
Leave them for other players to finish
80-20
on their
rule.
own time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. Try it out. Let me know how it works.
Definitely. And as we've said before on this podcast as well, we tend to not be so great at those Mafia type games where deception is a huge element.
Yeah.
So I mean, these strategies may be awesome. We may not be able to pull them off well, but you should still try them.
Yeah. Well, Dan, do we really have anything else to offer these people? Maybe a few tidbits, right?
We let's see. We talked about
to our listeners.
We
not
talked about
these people.
We
sorry.
talked
our valued listeners.
Our valued listeners. We've talked. I think we've talked down to timing here. When to do these things. When to bluff. When to guess multiple cards that you have. When not to do that. We talked about maybe some fun ways that you can try to throw people off the scent. I mean, we have a bullet here for tactics, just basic tactics, moving people away from significant rooms. If we wanted to talk about that, and also these sort of fun, and I'm not sure how strategic move of blocking someone in to a room.
Okay, maybe we can touch on those real quick. So yeah, if you think someone's close to pinpointing the correct room, say for whatever reason, you really don't want someone going into X room and guessing. Well, the nice thing about the rules is that you can literally teleport their piece to whatever room you can get to and guess in. Mm-hmm. So you might want to spend a guess just teleporting someone's piece so that they can't get into the correct room and get like good information. Now, again, this is something you could end up you could end up giving the information away if the person can tell you are trying to block them from guessing, the kitchen or the library. Because I keep using the kitchen. Say you yank someone away from the library, they might be pretty suspicious that's the library. So that could be a deceptive move, actually.
I for one would love to be teleported to the library.
Well, yeah. So okay, wait. But do you have anything to say about this thing specifically? Because I just thought.
You know what? Why don't you share your thought?
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think the big thing here, and again, it's going to be more theoretical, but we've just told everyone how to play super sneaky. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then we've told them that they should trust all the information on their Sherlock sheet as gospel. Okay, but other players can play sneaky too.
That's right.
So how do you account for that in your Sherlock sheet?
Well, I mean,
yeah.
Okay, so
you can only take
your Sherlock sheet. This is what should be down on your Sherlock sheet. You should know which cards are in your hand. Duh. Mm-hmm. And you should know when somebody suggested something, were they disproven, who disproved them, and what was in the set that was asked that was disproven. Mm-hmm. So I guess where that would get so assuming nobody ever guesses something that wasn't disproven, that.
Well, then
it really should be gospel. It shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, until some guess goes around that doesn't get disproven, then you pretty much have perfect information or great information. Okay,
exactly.
But then as soon as that happens, I guess you have some uncertainty. Mm-hmm. You have some like you were saying, you mark down the sets like 1s, 2s, and 3s, and so on. You basically have a set like that you can never really know. Mm-hmm. Because like say someone guesses a set of 3, it doesn't get disproven, then you know with certainty that the cards are either in the guessing player's hand or in
something in the margin.
Yeah, you could mark in the margin. Like you could mark. Yeah. Okay, I would mark any guess that doesn't get disproven. I would write down the guess.
Yeah, just flat out write it down.
Because because that has to tell you a lot of information. Every card, every time that happens, you know that card is either in the set of those 3, the set that was guessed.
Either one of those 3 is in the middle, either one or more of those things is in the middle, or all of them are in that person's hand.
Yeah, that should cover all the cases. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Okay. But in the rest, if one or more of them is in the middle, then the rest of them are in the other person's hand.
That's right.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so those 3 cards can only be split up between those 2 places. So in that way, you can kind of account for this. And there's like uncertainty involved there, right? Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, you might never be able to know in time. Like you could eventually figure it out if you made direct guesses and things, but you just don't. I feel like you don't have the time for that in a game with everyone else.
You might not. if you're
doing the
playing
same
with
thing.
if you're playing with 4 other skilled players and they're all they're all playing well in accordance with these principles, then yeah, you may not ever fully know what is in the middle before somebody guesses it.
Okay.
I think that's leading into the point you were trying to make.
Yeah. Well, it's a long-winded way of getting to a point, but I know I do think that what we talked about was pretty important there, because you gotta remember that everyone else can deceive you in the same ways you're deceiving them. You gotta remember that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, in a tight game, again, where you're playing against a lot of good players, you might need to take an educated
50-50 or a
50-50, maybe educated leap of faith, because and make an accusation at the end of your turn, because before your turn rolls around again, one of these other players is going to crack it, because there is simply so much information that has already been learned by the board.
Everyone, yeah.
That the tiny little remainder of information that needs to be learned for someone to make an accusation will be learned before it's your turn again.
Yeah. All right.
So I can't say specifically at what point that is, but I mean, I've described it theoretically as that's the situation.
That's the situation, and it's described theoretically in terms of what your opponents are up to. So it's going to be about you reading your opponents. If your opponents are really dialing in, I think that's one way to know how your opponent's doing is, are they guessing the same cards over and over again? Are they guessing similar sets of cards? That's going to tell you that they're really keying in on something.
Yes.
And so you can kind of pay attention to that. Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. And lastly, we got the fun tactic. I forget. I'm trying to think of other situations in our past podcasts where there have been things where Dan said, like, yeah, if you do this, you're really freaking cool. I'm trying to think.
That was Monopoly with the housing strategy.
With the housing shortage, yeah, exactly. So Monopoly, if you buy up all the houses and leave everyone else with no houses, you're a flipping boss.
Yeah.
In Clue, if you have to work together.
I believe the exact words were, "You're a freaking legend," and the bee's knees.
And the bee's knees.
Yes.
Okay, got it. So we got another bee's knees moment here, but it's a cooperative bee's knees moment. It's not going to come up every game. It might never come up. I honestly couldn't say it's ever happened to me.
I've never experienced it.
Yeah, but one way to just really mess with a player is that if someone's in a room and you just get everyone to stand in front of the doors to that room, then the person can't leave the room. And it seems sort of like it's a really arbitrary rule to me, but it's kind of funny. So if two people are at the door and then one person's in the room, then you can just really mess with someone by walking in front of the door.
Yeah. And I mean, not only can they not move, but as we discussed before, you can't make the same room accusation twice in a row. You have to
you have to
wait.
move.
You have to wait a term. You have to wait.
Well,
a turn.
you can't even, if you were locked in a room for a turn, you couldn't even guess on the next turn. You have to move out of the room, and then wait a turn, and then move back in before you can suggest that room again.
Wow. So you literally can't move and you can't guess until these a-holes stop blocking the door.
Right, and they also can't stay blocking the door because you're not allowed to move back onto the same spaces you were on before.
Right, that's true.
You can't just move back and forth or whatever.
I see. But you could we haven't really touched on this, but I mean the way that the board is it's pretty freeform in terms of where you can end up if you roll a 6. You could end up 6 squares away. If you wanted to, you could run. You could end up, you could snake and end up 3 or 4 squares away. I'll have to check my math on exactly that. But the idea is that movement is not necessarily linear. You can sort of circle around a little bit, perhaps. So, if you could orchestrate with like 3 or 4 other people, okay, you're going to block it this turn, and then I'm going to block it next turn, and then you could do that. It would, I think it would be completely unproductive, because in all this time, you and these people who are blocking the door are also not able to make guesses.
No one's gaining any information. Yeah. But, like we said, it's a great way to piss someone off. Great way to be a freaking legend.
Let's just say there's somebody we've talked about before on this podcast who I could see playing like this and getting people to play like this.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we don't need to talk about him anymore. He's just no.
Okay.
He's a great guy. Great guy, really. But he would do this for sure.
Absolutely.
And props to you if you know who we're referring to.
If you don't, go back and listen to our other episodes.
Yeah, I guess that's the only thing you can do.
All right. Well, does that wrap us up for today?
Dan, I think we might actually come in underneath an hour.
Wow. The last time that happened was Parcheesi.
You guys are probably overjoyed that you didn't have to, didn't get an hour and 15. Well, maybe let's not be so harsh on ourselves. Maybe people are bummed that they don't get enough of our content. That said, we have 2.5 minutes.
Oh, wow. Only 2.5 minutes.
2.5 minutes.
Yikes. Yeah. Well, which means that probably once we add in the intro and outro and everything, it'll be...
Don't worry about it.
Okay. 58 minutes. Good. All right. Well, thanks, John. It's been great to be back here podcasting with you. Like we have mentioned, we have some more content coming out. Next will be Carcassonne, date to be determined.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're coming at you with it. So stay tuned for that. John, any last words?
Yeah. Just remember to trust that Sherlock sheet.
Oh, yes.
And other than that, I think you guys are ready to be masters of Clue.
Awesome.
So yeah, thank you for listening. And this has been How to Beat Your Kids at Board Games. Signing off.
Thank you for listening to this episode of How to Beat Your Kids at Board Games. We hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something. We always do. If you like our show, please tell your friends and be sure to rate or review us wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by typing our acronym HTBYKABG in the search bar. If you have questions, comments, feedback, or suggestions for games you'd like us to cover, we'd love to hear from you. Please email us at htbykabg@gmail.com or message us on social media. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.